And this is a re-implementation of the game by Reiner Knizia known as Quo Vadis, and I think this is a really good example of how to do a re-implementation because they are making quite a few significant changes to this game, a lot more than just the theme and artwork, although I do appreciate that as well, but I think they're adding enough to make the game a little bit more exciting, a little bit more fun, and play a lot better at the different player counts. And some of these new changes include adding a new neutral character to the board that all the players will be able to influence through bribes, and this is the Peacock character. And with the addition of this neutral character, they're able to make some small tweaks to the board in order to balance it for all player counts, but then also make the main board extensible with the second board to open it up to be played with 6 to 7 players as well, which wasn't possible with the previous iteration of this game. And each animal in this game also has their own asymmetrical ability as well, which probably doesn't work in the way that you expect, and I'll get back to that in a minute here. But there's also going to be some special victory point tokens added to the game as well, that if you happen to pick those up, you'll gain those victory points, but then there'll also be a special action associated with it that you'll be able to perform as soon as you pick up that token. And as I mentioned before, this game is featuring a brand new theme along with brand new artwork that looks massively better than the previous version of this game. And to go along with that, we also have way better components with the meeples and tokens that you can see here, but I'm sure they're not limited to only what you can see in this image. And the way this game works is that each player is going to be controlling their own animal faction of a single type of animal, and what the players are trying to do is earn the title of the zoo mascot. And in order to do that, you have to get at least one of your meeples into the star exhibit, but then for all the animals that were able to get into that star exhibit, only the one with the most victory points of that set of animals is going to be the one that earns the title of the zoo mascot. And the way that players get their meeples to the star exhibit is that all the players are going to be starting with their meeples at the bottom of the board, and then you're going to be moving from exhibit to exhibit, crossing the paths between them, and picking up any of the victory point tokens that you happen to cross over. Anytime that you pick up a victory point token, you're replacing it with a random one from the supply, and the game continues like this until there's no room in that star exhibit and the winner is determined. But on a player's turn, you can perform 1 of 4 actions, and all players initially start the game with no animals out on the board. So of course, that is one of your actions that you can choose from, is to just place an animal to the bottom of the board in that first exhibit. But if you do have animals out on the board already, you might want to perform the action that allows you to advance that animal up the board. But the catch here is that in order to move from one exhibit to an adjacent exhibit, you actually have to have a vote, and you have to earn the majority votes in order to do so. Each exhibit has a certain number of spaces that players can occupy, and each of these spaces represent a seat, and you can try to get as many of your own animals into the same exhibit in order to increase your voting power, but oftentimes you'll probably find yourself in an exhibit with other players' characters, and you might be wondering why would they ever want to vote to allow you to move forward when that mostly benefits you. And there are a couple reasons for that. First of all, anytime that another player votes yes, they're going to be gaining a victory point token, but then the other reason is negotiation, and negotiation is a huge aspect of this game. You can pretty much negotiate whichever terms you want in order to try and convince your opposing players to vote yes to allow you to move forward. But keep in mind that the only binding contracts are ones that you can fulfill immediately. Any future promises don't have to be kept, so you might want to tread lightly there. But if you're not one to negotiate with the other players, there is another option here with the introduction of the neutral peacocks, because if you do have a peacock in the exhibit that you're currently in, then you can pay a token of 2 victory points or higher in order to earn the vote of that peacock. And one thing to note in this game is that none of your tokens can be broken down into change, so if you're paying a token of a higher value, you do not get change back, and you're just spending a higher value to get the same result. And another thing to note in this game is that you can't combine tokens in order to make a larger token of an equal value. So if you are bribing the peacocks, you have to give them a token of 2 or higher. They will not accept tokens lower than a value of 2, even if the tokens you have add up to it. But if you don't have the tokens to bribe the peacocks and you don't have the votes from the other players, there is still one very last way that you can move over to the next exhibit, and that is with the help of the zookeeper. And the way that the zookeeper works is that they can move to any of the paths between the exhibits out on the board, and when they're on that path, they're going to be covering the victory point token on that path. This means that if you are on an adjacent exhibit, you can move through the zookeeper absolutely for free, but unfortunately you do not gain the victory point token when doing so. And this is a good segue into the other two actions that you have available on your turn, and that is to either move the zookeeper to a new path, which you can use to your advantage to allow you to move freely between the exhibits, or you could even move the zookeeper to cover up a token that you think might be really valuable to another player. And the fourth and final action is to move one of the peacock tokens, and these move similar to the characters' animals where they have to move between adjacent enclosures, but you do get the added benefit of gaining 1 victory point anytime that you decide to move a peacock. And the game continues like this until the endgame condition is met, and then the player with the most victory points wins the game. But I did mention that I would come back to the asymmetrical character powers and the way that they work in the game, and each of these abilities are represented by tokens that you can find on top of each player's player screen. And this is an interesting part of the game because you do not actually get to use your own special ability, and the reason that these are tokens is because you actually use these as bargaining chips in the game. So if you're trying to negotiate with the other players, you might want to offer them up one of your special abilities in order to sweeten the deal. But you'll really want to consider when you agree to these terms because you only have a certain amount of these abilities available for the entire game, and as soon as you give away one of those tokens, you never get it back. And I really love this addition to the game, especially since this game is so negotiation heavy. This is just adding another dynamic to the negotiation, which plays such a giant role in the game. And as I mentioned before, I really do think this is a great example of how to re-implement a game because they have taken the core concepts of the game but added a lot more to it in a way that I think makes the game a lot more fun and makes it a lot more accessible to more players with the upgraded theme and components. And I think these changes to the game are really well thought out and are bringing some uniqueness to the game that I think is very welcome. So if you are interested in this one, you can find a link to the campaign in the description below.